Verbs. We have already learned what verbs are. Verbs represent an action or a state of being. However, there are a few more things we need to learn about verbs, particularly in how they are conjugated. And when you hear the word conjugate verbs, you may actually think about Spanish class or German or French or whatever language you've taken. However, we also need to talk about conjugating verbs in English. Regular verbs change consistently according to number, person, and tense. And this is very easy for you because you speak English, you know how to conjugate verbs. You know that the singular subject, he, takes the verb walks. He walks. However, if we have a third person plural subject, then we take the S off. They walk. You know that a singular subject can also change according to third person and first person. He walks, but I walk. You know that a verb changes according to tense. He walks, he walked, he has walked before. You know how to do all that because you speak English. So those verbs are easy, regular verbs. However, there are some verbs that prove a little more difficult for even those of us who grew up speaking English, and they are called irregular verbs. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple examples first. So on a test, you might see a sentence like this. The little boy had broke or broken his mother's favorite vase. So you have to choose, is it broke or broken? This one to me is pretty easy. The little boy had broken his mother's favorite vase. And what makes this one easy is the helping verb had. What makes it a past participle? We use that third column in the chart. If you're looking at the chart of irregular verbs in your textbook, is right next to the verb. However, it doesn't always work that way. You might see a sentence like this. Have you ever either ran or run the mile in under 6 minutes? So just think about which one would you choose on a test. The correct answer is run. Have you ever run the mile in under 6 minutes? Now, ran actually doesn't sound that bad. Have you ever ran the mile in under 6 minutes? However, the correct form is run because of that past participle version, have. You have run the mile in under 6 minutes. So that can make it a little trickier to understand the irregular verb, that you need that third column version. I run, I ran, I have run. I have never drank or drunk raspberry lemonade before. Which one would you pick? The correct answer is drunk. I drink, I drank, I have drunk. I have never drunk raspberry lemonade before. And that might sound a little funny to you. We misuse irregular verbs so often that sometimes the correct version actually sounds weird. But that's just, and here's the thing with irregular verbs is they're irregular. There's no real rhyme or reason or pattern. So you just have to review them. You just have to practice. And I did include just kind of a sample of, this is just a few. There are several. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of irregular verbs in English. But these are just a few. So the base form, the simple past, the past participle, like become, became, become again, begin, began, begun. They're all different. There's no rhyme or reason. And there are several, you can see the few highlighted here, that are the same all the way through. I bet today, yesterday I bet on a horse, and I have bet on that horse in the past. So there's no rhyme or reason. You just have to kind of review and practice. So I really encourage you to do the practice quizzes that I post on irregular verbs, because there will be a section on your next test on irregular verbs. We also need to discuss two common irregular verbs that tend to give people trouble, and that is lie and lay. All right, so let's just establish. The word lie means to recline. I will lie down and take a nap. Whereas the word lay means to set down. Please lay that book on the table. But the tricky thing about lie and lay, if you look at this chart over here on the right, that the past tense of lie is lay. Yesterday, I lay down and take a nap. The past participle of Lay is laid. The past participle of lie is lain, actually, which sounds weird. Is that even a word? I have lain on that bed before and taken many naps. So this one, honestly, you just kind of have to memorize the chart to get lie and lay right and understand the difference between those two words and the difference between the past tense and the present tense and the past participle. So I really can't give you a whole lot of advice other than to just, before you take a test or a quiz, make sure you study this chart and understand how it works. Okay, then the last thing I have to talk about as far as verbs, and this is pretty easy, is you do need to be able to recognize active versus passive verb voice. So what active voice, all that means, this may sound more complicated than it is, all that means is that the subject of the sentence is performing the action of the verb. So I ate pancakes this morning. I am the subject of the sentence and I did the eating. Therefore, the sentence is written in active voice. After breakfast, Dad changed the flat tire on my car. Dad is the subject of the sentence, the verb is changed, and Dad performed that action. He did the changing. So it's an active voice sentence. Whereas passive voice is when the subject of the sentence is being acted upon. It is not performing the action, but someone else is performing the action upon the subject. So this is probably a more awkward form of writing, but sometimes we have to use passive voice for whatever reason. The pancakes were made by my mom. So the subject of this sentence is pancakes. Now, did the pancakes make anything? No, they're being acted upon. They were made by my mom. My flat tire was changed by my very helpful dad. So the subject of the sentence, flat tire, the flat tire isn't doing anything in this sentence. So it's passive. All right, someone else is acting upon that tire. And I hope you can see that as far as your writing, active voice is much stronger. It flows better, it's less wordy. It's always better to use active voice in your writing. However, you do also need to be able to identify the difference between active and passive voice on a test or quiz. So verbs, pretty straightforward. Hope that makes sense to you. Let me know if you have any questions.